Hey everybody, welcome to our second video battle report. This will be another battle between the Varangur and the Goblins. We managed to get our army list up to 2,000 points. Feel free to leave back any comments and suggestions, and I hope you enjoy our video. You may notice a distinct improvement in the quality of our terrain. We were able to get together and game at Cloud City Games, which is our local hobby shop. Thank you very much to Cloud City for allowing us to play a game there and use their beautiful terrain. With this terrain, we got a little overzealous with placement. We just, it looked great, so we wanted to use it. So we kind of put a little too much down, and we treated everything except the craters as impassable terrain. This means that we ended up with a huge space in the very center of the table, which we couldn't move through, and it created two choke points on either flank of the table, and really reduced the amount of maneuvering that we could do during the game. I tried to bring a really balanced 2,000 point Varangur list. I had lots of blocks of infantry, some fast moving cavalry, including the Fallen, a giant cavern dweller, and this is the first game I was able to bring Herja. I wanted to try her out. I heard a lot of good things about her, and I used the Beastman model with wings to proxy as Herja. My opponent brought a variety of different orcs and goblins, a lot of infantry units, some trolls to back them up, a huge horde of cavalry with the Potion of the Caterpillar, and a rock thrower, which in the last game managed to land a total of 0 shots. He also had a couple wizards shooting lightning bolts at me, added an extra mincer from our last game, and kept the goblin on the chariot. I won the role to choose table sides, and I deployed first. I put the bulk of my forces on the larger choke point. I was hoping that my elite troops would be able to bust their way through and get to the back line of the orc side with the support of Herja, who I placed in the center. On the side with the smaller choke point, I put a unit of dogs, regiment of thralls, and the regiment of mounted sons of Krogan. The goblin deployment was very similar to mine. Most of the stronger, more elite troops were on the larger choke point, with a small detachment on the smaller choke point, hoping to push through there and possibly flank my forces. The rock thrower was placed on the large choke point and supported by the war trombone, both mincers, and the general on a chariot. It was at this point that we realized we probably put down too much terrain, but decided to play with it anyway because we wanted a bit of a meat grinder and just to throw our huge groups of infantry at each other for fun. The goblin player took first turn and started off on the small choke point, moving his horde up into the terrain. They were supported by more axes in the back and the wizard on the side. He knew that his slower movement would mean I'd get the charge off, so he decided to use the terrain to his advantage. On the large choke point, the goblin player moved up into the crater and positioned his general and mincers on the flank and moved his trombone up to be able to get a fire line through to the thralls. On my turn, I positioned my troops to hopefully get a charge off next turn. I used my thralls to screen my Fallen and the Sons of Varangur. I positioned the Horse Riot Raiders on the flank to hopefully get a counter charge off if necessary, and I used my dogs up as bait to see if I can get a charge off. I was really concerned by the right flank of the large choke point. Having 2 mincers and the orc general chariot on the right flank would mean that anything that would get charged on that side was probably going to die in a turn, if not 2 turns. So really great maneuvering on my opponent's part right there. On the smaller choke point, I charged the dogs in as bait to buy myself time to get the thralls in a position for a flank charge, and also brought the regiment of mounted sons of Varangur up for a charge next turn. Even though they were going to lose their Thunder's charge, I still felt pretty confident that they'd be able to chop their way through with the thrall support. My overall goal here was to be able to push the mounted sons through and flank or rear charge units on the large choke point. The first 3 turns saw a lot of maneuvering and setting up for charges. The Varangur units were constantly bombarded by a rock thrower, which did manage to hit this game, as well as a lot of lightning bolts, and really forced me to move forward and attack and give up some charges. My bait dogs got charged by the axes and were wavered in 1 charge. However, the other player saw that I would get the charge off on his mincers, and he backed them up and replaced them with the trolls to hopefully be able to take the charge and countercharge my cavern dweller in the following turn. The cavern dweller took a rock to the face from the rock lobber and took a lot of damage, but luckily I was able to regenerate some of it which really helped out in the long run. Unfortunately for the Goblin player, and the Trolls in particular, the Cavern Dweller's charge was really good, and I got a full 6 on his d6 plus 6 attacks, so 12 attacks, and I was able to actually rout them in one charge, which I was not expecting at all. Herja did charge in and assist with that charge as well. The War Trombone did some pretty heavy damage to the Thralls screening the Fallen, and wavered them, and the Fallen were kind of stuck behind them for the rest of the game, effectively taking them out of commission. I was able to retaliate with my Horse Archers, who were able to disorder the War Trombone and save me some pretty heavy damage for a turn or two. Meanwhile, on the left flank, the Thralls are unable to get a flank charge off on the Horde, and so we had a double charge on the front arc of the Horde, and they were locked in combat there for a lot longer than I hoped. Both the Giant and Herja received countercharges by the Goblin Chariot and Mincer, causing some pretty heavy wounds to both Herja and the Giant. In response, I repositioned Herja to the very center of my forces on the right flank. She was my only inspiring source, so I really needed to keep her alive for at least another couple turns. At this point, I had tons of infantry ready to charge in, but I didn't have the space to actually move them, so I wanted to clear out the Goblin rabble. I was really blocking up a lot of space. I flank charged the rabble with the Sons of Varangur and also charged them with the Thralls, sure that I'd be able to wipe them out this round. Even though I managed to do over 30 points of damage from one turn of charges on that rabble, I managed to roll Snake Eyes twice in a row on that rabble, and they stood firm, leaving my Sons of Varangur to sit there with their flanks wide open to the Fleabag Horde. By turn 4, we both stepped back to take stock of the battle and realized it was still pretty much anyone's game. To counteract my poor luck with the double Snake Eyes, I moved Herja over next to the Giant again to try to take on the Goblin General and Mincer so they couldn't flank me on the following turns. This ended up being a huge mistake, and Herja got charged by the Chariot General and actually got killed, leaving my force without any inspiring whatsoever. However, it wasn't all bad for me, as on the left flank I was able to chop through the horde of Sharpsticks and then also get a double charge off on the Moraxes that were stationed behind them. Both the Moraxes and Sharpsticks did their job and held up a ton of points of mounted Sons of Varangur, and they were unable to get over to the large choke point for the rest of the game, meaning that I actually lost some points on the left flank. Thanks to Herja's sacrifice, I was able to get my Fallen into combat against the Fleabag Horde without having to worry that Mincer is eating up the flank. Unfortunately, at this point, we had to call a game at the end of turn 5 as I had run out of time and needed to get going. I would say my MVP for sure was the Giant, who was able to take a ton of damage, regenerate a lot of it, and also triggered the Judgment ability from Herja and healed off a lot of health damage as well. We both learned a lot about the game and our lists. We're both pretty new players and can definitely work on both our techniques and our army compositions, and also our next game's going to have a little less terrain in it. We really appreciate you watching our battle report. We hope you enjoyed it, and as always, feel free to leave any type of comments or constructive criticism in the comment section below.